Welcome to Focus Washington. I'm Chuck Conconi. The issue today: how safe are plastic baby bottles and other plastic food containers that are made with the chemical Bisphenol-A? Also known as BPA, the Food and Drug Administration is now warning parents and consumers about potential health dangers. The FDA recently warned consumers not to put hot liquids into plastic bottles and containers used to feed infants. Joining us today is David Biello, Environment and Energy Editor at Scientific American. He's been covering the story for the past 2 years. David, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Focus Washington. It's great to have you here. This BPA, I don't quite understand what it is, what the controversy is involved in it. I mean, I've got a plastic container in my office that says it doesn't have any BPA in it.
Well, good for you. So BPA is a constituent of many industrial plastics. DVDs, cell phones, almost any consumer plastic that you use probably has BPA in it. The only time that it's a danger is when it's in food containers. So it's often in kind of the Tupperware type containers that you might be familiar with. What FDA is now recommending is that you don't subject those containers to hot water so that the BPA doesn't leach out of the plastic and then into the food that is contained.
Well, how do you wash things if you can't do them in hot water?
Well, that's a great question.
Problem.
That's exactly the problem. And that's why it's a little mysterious why the FDA would say, oh, you don't have to worry about it, it's perfectly safe, but don't wash it in hot water.
What's unsafe about it?
Well, BPA, and this has been known for decades, is a perfect mimic of the human hormone estrogen, which you may be familiar with. It gets into the human system and mimics estrogen in all its various functions and can therefore have a very profound effect on things like breast cancer or prostate cancer, but also a wide range of other health effects, even so much as obesity and heart disease.
Well, the FDA, are they doing enough, or is the warning enough?
The warning is probably not enough if these dangers turn out to be 100% real, and they appear to be. The FDA at this point is saying what we've been telling you in the past was probably incorrect. We're going to reopen an investigation into this chemical, and while we are investigating, if you have concerns, avoid it in this way. But they're still kind of the official party line. It's perfectly safe. You don't need to worry about it. But if you are worried about it, you can avoid it in this way.
Well, if I have a drinking container that was made without it, why is it necessary to use it? Is it cheaper? I mean, why do...
Oh, why use the BPA in the first place?
Why use it in the first place?
Well, it's been used for decades, first of all, to build these polycarbonate plastics, so industry is obviously very familiar with it. We're making, and I might get the exact figure wrong, 6 million pounds a year, I believe, in the US alone. It goes into a lot of stuff. And industry has developed a whole range of mechanisms for using BPA and turning it into the plastics that we all use.
But there are alternatives that can be used.
Absolutely. The Japanese first became concerned about BPA in the 1990s. They did their own studies, and where they had their most concern was in the lining of metal cans. So actually they put a thin coating of plastic on the inside of metal cans to keep the metal from leaching into the food. Sure. But it turns out that thin coating of plastic can leach into the food as well, specifically BPA. The Japanese had concerns about that. They did some tests. They said, you know what? It's got health effects. We're going to get rid of it. And since 1999, they have had a natural alternative to BPA for their epoxy linings.
Well, paying attention and being very close to the subject as you are, does it look like the Obama administration is going to do anything about this, and particularly FDA, really go for a ban?
It's definitely a big shift already. Just even coming out and saying we were probably wrong about BPA, because just a year ago, FDA was still saying what they'd been saying for the last couple of decades. BPA is perfectly safe. We have no concerns, and we have no desire to kind of reopen this issue. This, despite hundreds, literally hundreds, of scientific studies over the course of the last decade showing BPA health effects in animals, human cells, and actual humans. And so now FDA is deciding to kind of take account of this scientific evidence and perhaps change direction.
Have we seen tragedies in children or babies because of this, that's provable?
We have definitely seen health effects. So, you know, BPA isn't murdering children in their cribs
not
or anything like that.
thalidomide or
it's
anything
not
like
like
that.
thalidomide, but it is having long-term kind of what they call mortality outcomes. So, for example, your chance of developing prostate cancer increases with your exposure to BPA at a younger age, or your risk of cardiovascular disease as well.
You would think that, especially when you're feeding children with plastic baby bottles, this is something that the FDA would say ban completely right now.
Yeah, and that's what many other countries, not just Japan, Canada, our neighbor to the north, banned BPA in all baby products just last year. And this was right around the time that FDA was saying, no, you know, it's perfectly safe. And they've now done a bit of an about-face on that. So some states have already moved to ban BPA in baby bottles. So perhaps some kind of a federal law will take place, and that's been a top priority for the EPA administrator. But you know, it will require new legislation. The way that kind of our toxic substances legal framework is created, we would need a new law to regulate this.
As a consumer, how do you know whether the product you're using has BPA in it?
The number 7 on the bottom of your plastic container, you know, these recycling numbers is a good indication. That's usually that's kind of a catch-all for anything that's not 1 through 6, which are other types of plastics. But that's usually a pretty good indicator that BPA is in there. Any kind of a metal can with food in it in the U.S. is likely to have BPA, and the best way to avoid that is to actually move to the Tetra Pak, you know, the cardboard containers for soups or whatever it might be.
Interesting. So I've got to go home and look and see if I have 7s and throw stuff away. One more general.
Just don't heat it. Just don't heat it.
You know, Obama said that he was going to be, scientific education was going to be one of his priorities. So we got time just for one quick answer. How would you grade him so far? What are your expectations for him?
Well, they've just announced a new huge initiative of science education, so that's pretty promising. And I think this is an area that has actually bipartisan support. The fact that perhaps our science education here in this country has kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit. But as far as kind of following the science, I would give the Obama administration very high marks. I mean, kind of across the board. They seem to be moving at all the regulatory agencies and in the legislative process to kind of try to follow what the science is telling us about issues from climate change to BPA to smog to whatever else.
Well, then that's something hopeful for this administration.
Yeah, that might be the only thing.
Thank you for visiting me on Focus Washington.
Thank you.
I'm Chuck Conconi, and this has been Focus Washington.